We treat life with deadly seriousness, as if it were a final exam where every mistake is permanent. You wake up and feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. The bills, your career, your relationship, the opinions of others. You feel like a soldier in an endless battle, where one false move could mean your downfall. This seriousness, this heaviness, is the source of all your fatigue and anxiety. What if I told you that this heaviness is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? You're not in a courtroom. You're in a playground. Life is a game, but not a trivial one. It's a complex, profound game with real consequences, but a game nonetheless. And why do I say this with such certainty? Because, as in any game, there are three central elements. There are the pieces on the board, there is the player who moves the pieces, and there are the rules. Your biggest mistake, the source of your seriousness, is that you confused yourself. You looked at the pieces on the board, your body, your name, your position, your bank account, your personal history, and said, "That's me." The moment you believe that, and the game becomes a nightmare. Because now, everything that happens to the play happens to you. If the play is criticized, you is diminished. If the part fails, you is a failure. If the piece is threatened, you feels mortal terror. The game ceases to be a learning experience and becomes a fight for survival. Think about how you play a video game or a board game. You choose an avatar, a piece. Do you care about it? Yes. Do you try to win? Of course. Do you play with focus and strategy? Absolutely. But if your avatar falls into a trap or loses a life, do you despair? Do you think your real life is over? No. You might feel momentary frustration, but you take a deep breath and think, okay, what have I learned? Let's go again. Why? Because you never forget that you real is safe, holding the controller, off screen. What I'm here to tell you is that your life works exactly the same way. The you call me, that person with that name, with those memories and fears, is just your avatar in this magnificent game of existence. The real you is the consciousness holding the controls. The real you is the player, not the piece. When you forget this, you become what I call a method actor, an actor who immerses himself so deeply in the role that he forgets he's acting. He goes home and continues to be the king, the villain, or the beggar. He forgets the stage exit. You've become that actor. You've fused with your role as serious professional, perfect mother, successful man, or suffering person. You've believed in the costume so much that you've forgotten the skin underneath. The first rule of hacking this game, then, isn't about changing the world outside. It's about changing your perspective inside. It's about remembering who you really are, the player, not the piece. When you make this distinction, the entire game changes. Deadly seriousness disappears and gives way to curiosity. Paralyzing fear disappears and gives way to a willingness to experiment. You stop trying to protect your peace at all costs and start asking yourself, what can I learn from this phase? You realize you're not stuck in the character. You can play it brilliantly, savor its victories, learn deeply from its defeats, but you no longer have to be imprisoned for him. You can feel the pain of defeat in the game, but you don't need to add to it the suffering to believe that you and the defeated. And herein lies the second great rule that will make you master the game. This game has no final win or lose condition. There is no definitive game over where you win or lose forever. The object of the game is simply the act of playing. The purpose of existence is the experience itself. You've been conditioned to see life as a race with a finish line. You race through childhood to reach adulthood. You race through college to reach your career. You race through your career to reach retirement. And then one day, you stop, look back, and realize you've spent your entire life in the waiting room, waiting for the game to start. But the game was happening all along. Life feels less like a race and more like a dance. You don't dance to get to a specific point on the dance floor. You dance for the joy of the movement itself. The meaning is in each step, not the final destination. You don't listen to a song just for it to end. You listen to it for the beauty of each note. The game of life happens, now not in the future you plan, nor in the past you regret, but in this very moment. And the hack is to bring your attention back to the only place where you can actually make a move. The present. You sit, exhausted from the race, and wonder why it never seems to be enough. It's because you're trying to win a game that was made just to be played, and this shift in perception is key to understanding how this game, which seems so punishing, was actually designed in your favor. The only place you can play is share a now. The now is not a moment in time. It's the game board itself. It's the only interface where the player, that's you, can interact with the piece. That's your avatar. However, you spend most of your time off the board. Your mind is either in the past, mulling over wrong moves, or in the future, trying to predict every possible move. You're in the middle of the game, but your attention is anywhere but on the only move that matters. This one. Now, let's get to the most fascinating rule of this game's architecture. It was designed in your favor, completely. How is that possible, you ask, as you point to your pain, your losses, your frustrations? How can it be in my favor when I suffer so much? It's possible because the design is smarter than you might think. No matter what happens to your piece on the board, no matter what role you're supposed to play, you can't really lose. Why? Because you are not just the play. You are the consciousness that observes the game. Let's use another analogy. Think of a dream you had. In a dream, you might be a hero chased by a monster. The fear you feel is 100% real. The terror is palpable. But the moment you wake up, what happens? You realize two things. First, that you were safe all along. Second, that you were the whole dream. You were the hero running, but you were also the monster chasing him. You were the dark street and the feeling of fear. You were the creator of the entire experience. Likewise, you are not only one piece in this cosmic game, competing against all others. You are the playing field itself, experiencing yourself through multiple avatars. This may sound abstract, but look at your daily experience. That person who irritates you deeply at work, that situation that challenges you, that obstacle that seems insurmountable. These are all part of your experience. These events only exist for you because they are rendered within your consciousness. In a very real sense, the entire universe, as you know it, is happening within of you. You are not a fragile little piece in a hostile world. You are the world itself, looking at itself through the temporary eyes of your avatar. When you grasp this truth, the deadly seriousness breaks. You stop taking everything so personally. When someone criticizes you, instead of feeling attacked, like the piece being hit, you step back and observe like the player. Interesting. The universe just sent me a character to test my patience. What does this reflect about me? Why does this bother me? The victim's question is, why is this happening with me? The player's question is, what is this situation trying to do to me, to teach? This simple shift in question fundamentally alters your relationship with reality. You cease to be a passive object being buffeted by blind fate and become an active participant in your own growth. The universe ceases to be an adversary and reveals itself as a training partner. As sparring, he doesn't send you challenges to punish you. He sends you challenges to strengthen you. Every difficult person, every obstacle is a weight in your existential gym, perfectly calibrated for the muscle you need to develop. The resistance you feel isn't life trying to crush you. It's life giving you traction. You can only build strength if there's something to push against. This difficult situation isn't a wall. It's a stepping stone. If you are the dreamer and the dream, you are not a victim of circumstances. You and circumstances appearing to you as challenges. And why? To make the game interesting, to force your growth, to break your stagnation. A game that's too easy, without challenges, isn't a game at all. It's boring. You're not here to be bored. You're here to evolve. This doesn't mean, in any way, that you should become passive or indifferent? Oh, it's all a dream, so I'm not going to do anything. That's the opposite of hacking. That's giving up on the game. When you know it's a game, you can, for the first time, play it masterfully, with complete enthusiasm. You can care deeply about every move, but without being devastated for the result. EQ. You can love someone with all your heart, but if that person decides to follow a different path, you can feel the pain of loss, the pain of the piece that lost an ally, without adding the suffering of believing your life is over, because the real player is fine. You can dedicate yourself passionately to your work, but if the project fails, you are not a failure. You are a player who learned a valuable lesson for the next move. The secret is the light touch. It's the ability to be 100% committed to the action, but 100% detached from the outcome. You do your absolute best, and then let go. You accept the outcome as feedback from the system, not as a final judgment on who you are. This identification with the player, rather than the play, gives them a freedom that the character, trapped in their own narrative, will never know. The character lives in constant fear. The player lives in constant curiosity. And this fluidity is what frees us from the greatest lie of all. The lie that you have to be the same forever. Playing with a light touch is what separates the master from the amateur. The amateur tries to force reality to fit his plan. The master flows with the reality that presents itself. It's the difference between a rigid musician tied to the score and a jazz master who improvises with the notes that arise in the moment. You were taught to be rigid. You were taught that you need to be someone, that you need to have a fixed personality, a set of unchanging opinions. That's just the way I am. I don't change. You say this as if it were a virtue, but in reality, it's your prison. Here's one of the most liberating rules in the game's entire architecture. You're not obligated to be consistent. You're not bound by a contract that forces you to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. The character you've been playing, with all its limitations, fears, and habits, isn't a permanent structure. It's a costume, and you can change it. You spend an incredible amount of energy every day defending this static image of yourself, protecting your reputation, maintaining your personality. But why? Why must today's me be a slave chained to yesterday's me? What if, instead of being stuck in your past, you could reinvent yourself every morning? Not chaotically, but fluidly and creatively. You are not a noun. You are not a thing finished. You are a verb. You are a process in constant motion. Rigidity is the beginning of death. Fluidity is the sign of life. What if you approached your next challenge not as the me who failed last time, but as the me who is being born right now? Every 3 paragraphs, you asked me a thought-provoking question. Here it is. What would you do today if you didn't have to carry the weight of who you were yesterday? This defense of your past identity is not only exhausting, it's the root of all fear. You fear criticism because it threatens the image you've built. You fear failure because it contradicts the script of the successful self you've written. You fear the new because your old self doesn't know how to react to it. You've become the curator of a museum dedicated to a statue of yourself, spending all your time dusting it and preventing anyone from touching it, forgetting that real life is happening outside. Freeing yourself from consistency isn't about losing yourself, it's about finding yourself for the first time. It's about allowing the player's intelligence to flow through the avatar without the restrictive filter of who I think I am. This fluidity leads us to a beautiful revelation. Every person you meet is you wearing a different mask, playing a different role in the same game. That colleague who irritates you, that difficult relative, that stranger who smiles at you. They're all you. They're other manifestations of the same consciousness, exploring what it's like to be a different character. They're fragments of yourself, sent to you to teach you something. When you truly understand this, compassion ceases to be a moral effort and becomes a logical recognition. It's not the condescending compassion of poor him. It's the profound recognition of I am him. I am you. We're in this together. You realize you're in the same theater with everyone else. Some are deeply asleep in their roles, believing they are the play. Others are beginning to wake up. But everyone is part of the same company. This doesn't mean that everyone is the same on the surface level of the character. Avatars are different. They have different programming, stories, and abilities. Diversity is what makes the game rich. But at the deeper level, the level of player, the consciousness that looks through their eyes is the same consciousness that looks through its own. We are all rays of light from the same sun. And here's the hack within this revelation. The people who challenge you the most, those who appear to be your opposites or your enemies, are actually your most important allies in the game. They're not sent to punish you. They're sent by the system, by player who you are, to pinpoint exactly where you're still stuck. That person who irritates you is simply showing you a button on your dashboard that you haven't yet learned to control. The one who criticizes you is giving you a golden opportunity to practice detaching from your self-image. Instead of seeing them as adversaries, you can begin to see them as masters in disguise, essential to your evolution. What would happen to your relationships if, instead of seeing an enemy or a stranger, you saw yourself looking back, only playing a different role? A role designed for your own awakening? Now that we understand the fluidity of the I, your avatar, and the unity of the other avatars, we're ready to tackle the hardest part of the game. The part that makes most players want to give up. The part that, when misunderstood, turns the playground into hell. How do you deal with suffering? How do you play masterfully when the game's script seems to demand your destruction? When you're dealt what seems like an unplayable hand, the first thing to understand is the vital distinction, the alchemical difference between pain and suffering. The first thing to understand, when the game presents you with the inevitable, is that suffering is not the same thing as pain. Pain is a fact. Suffering is a choice. Pain is the pure signal. Suffering is your interpretation of the signal. Pain is natural. Suffering is your resistance to what is natural. If you stub your toe, you feel pain. It's a clear, physical signal. If someone you love leaves, you feel the pain of grief. It's a deep emotional pain. These signals are part of the game. They're the system's feedback. Trying to avoid all the pain is like trying to play a video game without the alert sounds or the health bar. You'd be playing blind. But suffering? Oh, that's an extra layer. It's your creation. Suffering is the history that your ego counts on to miss. Pain says, "This hurts." Suffering says, "This shouldn't be happening to me. It's unfair. The world is against me. My life is over." Pain is the raw sensation. Suffering is the judgment you attach to it. You don't suffer because of the pain. You suffer because of your requirement that life is different from what it is. When you finally understand this distinction, you learn the alchemy of experiencing pain without adding the poison of suffering. You can allow sadness to pass through you, like a necessary rain cloud, without the added narrative that you should be happy all the time. You can face an immense challenge without the paralyzing narrative that you are a victim. This is what philosophers call amor fati, the love of destiny. It is not a passive acceptance. It is a courageous acceptance. It is the ability to look at all what the game presents to you, the good times and the hard times, and say, "Yes, I accept this play. What can I learn from it? How can I use it to become stronger?" Practice the amor fati. It's the ultimate hack against the victim mentality. The victim sees the obstacle as a punishment. The player who loves their fate sees the obstacle as a curriculum. You don't ask, "Why me?" You ask, "What for me?" This courageous acceptance doesn't mean you shouldn't act to change things. Quite the opposite. You can only effectively change a situation when you first accept it as it is. Resistance is what keeps you stuck. Acceptance is what gives you back your power. When you stop wasting energy fighting the fact that it's raining, you can grab an umbrella or build a shelter. Accepting the play is the first step to mastering the next play. You stop fighting the game's design and start using it. Think of your consciousness as the sky, and your internal states, emotions, thoughts, as the weather. Sometimes the sky is clear. Sometimes it's stormy. The sky, your consciousness, doesn't fight the rain. It doesn't cling to the sun. It simply allows, let the weather happen, knowing it's temporary. You can learn to be the sky for your own inner weather. Suffering is trying to force the sun to shine in the middle of a hurricane. Here's another rule that will save you a ton of energy. You don't have to have an opinion about everything. You don't have to judge every experience as good or bad. Sometimes you can just observe and say, "Interesting." You've been trained to be a judgment machine. But this constant judgment is exhausting. It's like being a film critic who can no longer enjoy the movie because he's too busy analyzing its flaws. Sometimes you can just watch the movie of life. Just experience it. Without needing to label everything. This incessant need to label everything as good or bad comes from the ego, from the peace, which needs to feel secure and in control. If it labels something good, it tries to cling to it, generating anxiety. If it labels it bad, it tries to resist it, generating anger and suffering. In both cases, you lose the present. The player, on the other hand, understands that good and bad are just temporary labels based on a very limited view of the board. The move that seems bad today, losing your job, may be exactly what forces you to find your true path tomorrow. The good event, winning the lottery, may be the one that leads to your downfall. The master player suspends judgment. They trade evaluation for observation. They cultivate curiosity. The master player has preferences, but he's not a slave to them. He may prefer sunshine, but he doesn't despair when it rains. He knows both are necessary for the game. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, life will throw you a plot twist. Instead of resisting these surprises, embrace them. They're what keep the game interesting. Imagine a game where you knew exactly what would happen. How boring. The challenges, the unlikely events, the unexpected failure. These are what make life an adventure. The obstacle and the way. The crisis is not a bug in the system. It is the system offering you the chance to level up. And this brings us to the most liberating discovery of all. There are no real mistakes. There are only experiments. What you call failure is simply an experiment that yielded an unexpected result. What you call success is an experiment that yielded the expected result. But both are just that. Data, information, feedback. A scientist doesn't call himself a failure when an experiment fails to prove his hypothesis. He calls it a result. He learns and adjusts the next time he tries. So why do you, in the laboratory of life, turn every stumble into proof of your inability? You've been conditioned by the culture of perfection to believe you should get everything right the first time. You turn mistakes into sins. You see setbacks as proof of your inadequacy, rather than seeing them as part of life, mandatory of learning. What if you could approach your life with the attitude of a craftsman who knows that mastery is built on 1,000 failures? What if every mistake were just information? Every failure just feedback? How much lighter would you feel if you could release the weight of self-judgment? You're here to learn how to play, not to prove you already know the rules. Here's something that will surprise your ego. Addicted to fighting for life. The best players are often the ones who seem to be trying the least. They move through life with a kind of ease, not because they don't care, but because they've stopped fighting against the flow of reality and began to work with he. It's the difference between desperately swimming against the current and using the current's own strength to navigate. Both require skill, but the former leads to exhaustion, the latter to mastery. The exhausted swimmer, ruled by ego, sees the river as an enemy. But the master swimmer, the player's conscience, sees the river as a vehicle. When you understand the subtle currents of life, when you learn to read the patterns of the system, when you stop trying to impose your small will against the vast intelligence of the whole, you discover that you can accomplish much more with much less effort. This isn't laziness. This is smart action. This is what in Eastern philosophy is called wu wei. It does not mean non-action, it means effortless action, or perfectly appropriate action. It's like water flowing through a stream. The water doesn't fight the rock. It doesn't declare war on the rock. It simply flows around it. And yet, by flowing persistently, over time, the water wears away the rock. This is the power of the gentle approach, the power of the light touch. The master player knows that brute force is rarely the smart answer. Another crucial aspect of mastering this flow is learning to play multiple roles without becoming confused by them. In a single day, you're called upon to be a professional, perhaps a father or mother, a son, a friend, or a lover. Each role has its own outfit and its own rules. The skilled player moves fluidly between these roles without losing their center. They don't get stuck in a single identity. Most people make the mistake of trying to be the same person in every situation. They call this being authentic. But that's not authenticity. It's rigidity. True authenticity isn't being the same self everywhere. True authenticity is being appropriate at every moment. It's being like water, which is always itself, but takes the form of the container it's in. Your rigid identity, this I you defend, is not you. It's just a habit. You can choose new habits, new roles, new ways of responding to the game, just as water chooses new paths. And this brings us to the most interactive and perhaps most shocking aspect of the game's architecture. The rules are not entirely fixed. They can and do change based on us you choose to play. This is where the game becomes magical. This is where the prisoner becomes the architect. Their choices, their beliefs, their attitudes, their inner vibration. All of these actively influence how the game unfolds. For you, if you approach life with fear and suspicion, expecting the worst, you tend to encounter situations that confirm your fears. The system gives you what you're looking for. Your perception acts like a filter. It only allows through the reality that matches your beliefs. If you play the victim, believing the world is hostile and no one can be trusted, you'll find plenty of people willing to play the villain to confirm your narrative. You'll see betrayal everywhere because that's what your filter is programmed to find. The game is a perfect mirror. It doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you want. And it reflects back to you the contents of your own consciousness. Most people spend their lives yelling at the mirror, trying to force it to change its image. They try to change the world outside without realizing that the world outside is merely a reflection of who they are inside. You don't change a reflection by changing the mirror. You change the reflection by changing the original object. You change the game by changing yourself. But what happens when you stop playing the victim? What happens when you consciously decide to take on the role of creator? When you shift your internal belief from "I'm here to survive" to "I'm here to learn," the whole game changes. The same events that once felt like attacks now feel like lessons. The same person who once felt like an enemy now feels like a teacher. The villain doesn't magically disappear, but their function in your game changes. He's no longer there to prove you a victim. He's there to teach you patience or detachment. This is the power of being a co-architect of the game. You can't control the cards you're dealt, but you have absolute control over as you decide to interpret and play them. You may not control what the world presents to you, but you control what meaning that you attribute to it. And by changing the meaning, you change the experience. You change the game. This is your greatest agency, your greatest power. You are right now choosing the kind of game you're playing, even if you don't realize it. The question is, are you doing this consciously? If you play the role of the creator, the seeker of truth and evolution, you discover your own capacity for courage and resilience. If you approach life with curiosity, hoping to find meaning, the system responds. It begins to show you the adventures and synchronicities that were hidden beneath your former layer of fear. Becoming a creator is a fundamental reallocation of energy. The avatar, stuck in survival mode, spends 90% of its energy defending itself, defending its point of view, its reputation, its territory. It's a reactive stance. The creator shifts to an active stance. The energy that was previously spent on defense is now freed up for construction, exploration, and expression. You stop asking, "What could go wrong?" and start asking, "What can we build here?" The game system, which is a mirror, stops sending you enemies to fight and starts sending you materials to build. This isn't magical thinking. It's the recognition that your consciousness isn't a passive observer. It's an active participant in creation of your reality. Your attention, your intention, your deepest beliefs are active ingredients in the unfolding of your experience. You are not just in a world. You are creating your world with every breath. And here's the most beautiful aspect of the entire design. In this game, everyone can win, but not in the way your scarcity-obsessed culture defines victory. The usual idea of winning is a zero-sum game. For me to win, someone has to lose. This is the logic of imprisonment, of the separated ego. In the cosmic game, in real architecture, your victory doesn't require anyone's defeat. In fact, it's the opposite. The more skillfully you play, the more awake you become, the more you help all others to play better too. When you find your true happiness, the one that comes from within, from the player, not from outside, from the peace, you don't make others unhappy. You become a beacon. When you are genuinely at peace in the midst of chaos, you become the calm center that helps others find theirs. This is the shift from the logic of scarcity to the logic of abundance. The ego, the peace, believes that everything is limited. Love, success, recognition. If someone else wins, I lose. The player, the consciousness, knows that the source of everything, peace, love, creativity, is internal and infinite. You cannot spend your peace. You can only express it. By playing as the player, you automatically leave the arena of competition and enter the garden of collaboration. You don't need to dim the other's light to shine. You realize that their light is your own light reflected back. That's why masters, truly skilled players, seem to be playing a different game. They're not competing. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not keeping score. They're simply playing for the sheer joy of it, for the art of movement. And, just by their presence, everyone around them starts playing better too. Let me share the final rule. The architectural guarantee? The game never ends. What you, in your fear, call death is just the end of a chapter. It's the avatar shutting down. But the player, the real you, the silent consciousness that has been watching this entire performance, this continues. This fear of death, the fear of game over, is the main rule of the ego's prison. It's what keeps you small, scared, and serious. It's the final boss of the game. But the player doesn't fear the end of the game, just as you don't fear the end of a movie. You understand it's an experience. This doesn't remove the importance of the avatar. On the contrary, it makes their time precious. But it removes the terror. You can finally play with abandon, with courage, taking the creative and emotional risks necessary for mastery, because you know, at your deepest level, that the real you cannot be broken. When you truly grasp this, the fundamental fear that has dictated all your moves simply dissolves. You stop clinging so desperately to your current role. You stop being so afraid of change. You realize that you're not just no game. You and the game, playing yourself, exploring infinite possibilities. And so, we come to the end of this broadcast. How can you apply this in practice today? Start small. First, today, simply observe the roles you play, without judgment. Ask yourself, who's acting now, the player or the character? Second, identify your resistance. Where are you struggling? What is the history? What are you telling about your pain? Separate fact, the pain, from fiction, the suffering. Third, practice amor, fati. Faced with a challenge today, small or large, breathe and whisper, I accept this move. What has it come to teach me? Don't underestimate these steps. The first, observing your roles, is the act of turning on the light in the room. It's the beginning of the separation between the player and the piece. The second, Identifying the story is the act of reading the source code of your suffering. If you don't see the story, you're trapped in it. The third, amor fati, is the daily exercise. It's the muscle of acceptance. Start by accepting traffic, accepting spilled coffee, accepting criticism. It's in these small moments that a player is forged. The next time you catch yourself taking life with deadly seriousness, remember, you are not the piece. You are the player. You are not the fragile avatar. You are the entire universe, playing at being an individual for a while. It's all a game. It's all a dance. Play with skill. Play with joy. And play with that light touch. This exploration ends, but the conversation doesn't need to. If this broadcast resonated with you, if it sparked a memory, leave your mark, like this video. Comment below, even anonymously if you prefer, with your own experience of the game. And subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the next levels of this magnificent construction together. The game never ends. It just changes form. And what a delightful game it is.